Good afternoon and welcome to this session focused on the future of food and what it means for Australia. I'm Michele, Allan, the Chair of Food Innovation Australia, the Food and Agribusiness Growth Centre. The food and agribusiness sector, that is from farm right through to fork, is made up of 176,000 businesses, 98% being small to medium enterprises, with 70% of these in regional locations. The food and agribusiness sector employs over 500,000 people and is the largest and fastest growing manufacturing sector, not to mention the second largest employer. Over the past 18 months, there's been a renewed national focus on value add, building national sovereignty, harnessing our competitive advantage, and rebuilding the manufacturing opportunities and capabilities, all with good reason. FIAL was established in 2013 by the Australian government. These issues have been our bread and butter to grow the potential and value of the Australian food and agribusiness sector by building capability, sharing knowledge, and creating connections. Our focus is pre and post farm gate, not just on the production of commodities, but rather on the transformation of these commodities into food, the value-added component. This is where value is created and where the true potential of the sector is unlocked. The Outlook conference has been that time of the year when we hear about the gross value generated by our commodities and look to the coming forecast. Not surprisingly, the focus has therefore been largely pre-farm gate. And while this is important, it's just as important to consider what we could do better. So it may not come as a surprise to learn that the food and agribusiness sector is not living up to its full potential. FIAL, CSIRO, National Farmers Federation and the Agribusiness Association of Australia all agree. In 2020, the government asked FIAL to undertake a detailed analysis to determine the potential of the sector. Our work showed that the entire sector has the potential to triple its value, reaching over 200 billion on a value-added basis by 2030, while also creating 300,000 jobs. The results are detailed in the Capturing the Prize report, identifying 19 growth opportunities, which shows how to bring the 200 billion potential into reality. Since finalising this work, FIAL's been collaborating with many across the value chain to take the next steps to realise this $200 billion potential. If you haven't already seen this exciting work, please get in touch with the FIAL team. The panel of speakers will touch on key elements of the value add pathway and provide case studies of how we can transform this sector to reach its 200 billion potential. But before we get started, I wanted to share one of the tools FIAL has developed to help the sector unlock its 200 billion potential. A key challenge business tells us that they need to overcome is finding a buyer for their product. But knowing where to look, which market and which channel can be challenging. The past 2 years have made this almost impossible. FIAL developed the Australian Food and Beverage Catalogue to directly address this challenge, connecting buyers and sellers. Over the past 2 years, it's been a critical business tool for many businesses, and this week, we're launching the latest version. I'd encourage you to take a moment after this session to visit the Australian Food and Beverage Catalogue, especially those in business. If you'd like further information, head to the FIAL website or connect with FIAL on LinkedIn. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Denise Hamblin, and we're in for a treat as Denise not only shares some key insights, but also explains the importance of meeting these challenging consumer behaviours in order to unlock value. Please welcome Dr. Denise Hamblin.
Hello all, and thank you for having me here today to speak to you about the future of food from a consumer and market perspective. In the next 10 minutes or so, I'll touch on how consumers are changing, both in Australia and a global context, and what the implications are for future innovation trends, for our health, our impact on the environment and consumer spend. I'll finish with a summary of what to keep in mind in the short and longer term as you move through your goals and innovation planning. One of the frameworks that we like to utilise at Kantar when looking into the future around consumer pull for innovation is the Millennium Monitor. Now, this is an academically based model and a longitudinal tracker which segments time and helps our clients prioritise their innovation and how to target it appropriately. The key focus is consumer values and how they change slowly over time. Being cyclical, this means we can plan ahead to meet consumer demand. Now, after an intensification of conformity values early in the pandemic, as we measured, we've seen this return to the usual clockwise momentum. Whilst the predominant values are those of safety and security and the familiar, this is where we do see an over-index of older generations, and conversely, younger generations over-index in the rebellion. And this is ultimately what is ahead for the mass. The implications here are significant for our industry, and whilst these results are Australian-centric, we know from Kantar's Global Monitor work that we are in good company with similar results in the US and the UK. But we also know that we can look to markets that are ahead of us through APAC, Europe and North America, driving demand for innovation in areas like functional foods and sustainable practices. So the first focus here is on trends overall. So as values move towards rebellion, there is this growing desire for fairness, transparency, equality, and a simplification of life. And we tend to be less interested in the creators of a product and more interested in what that product can do for us functionally or what that product stands for. We're also looking for choices that empower us from a health and a sustainability perspective. A nice example of this is the Maggie beer brand that for a decade ago was a crafted artisan brand that really heroed provenance. Now, future-proofing required an evolution, and we're seeing that come to the fore with a strong social media presence, investment in e-commerce and subscription models, NPD for adjacent categories, specifically in the plant-based and zero alc space, and forging purpose through Maggie's Recipes for Life as well as her foundation. In terms of health for consumers, change is also ahead. And although the majority of us agree to prioritising our health and well-being, only 6 in 10 are satisfied with our level of health. In conformity, it's, what's good for the community is good for us. And the diet types that over-index here are weight reduction, low cholesterol diets and sugar-free diets. But in rebellion, it's very different. We desire a more personalised approach. And the diet types that over-index here are more so the vegetarian and flexitarian type diets, dairy-free diets and low-carb, high-fat diets. And I think a good example of this can be seen with a consumer pull towards alternatives, meat alternatives, dairy alternatives, wheat alternatives, and you'll hear a lot more of that in coming presentations, I'm sure. But also in comparison of a blanket approach to what we should prioritise in our diet, such as the health star rating, compared to the tech-enabled personalised version that you might find in a platform like Lowy, which I'm showing here. This kind of guides consumers on tailored food supplements based on blood and lifestyle diagnostics. And other examples that you might be aware of or maybe have even tried out include MyDNA, Noom, the BU app, and so forth. Now let's focus on the environment, and overall Australians do care about the environment predominantly. Climate change, future energy supplies, water security, the sustainability of agriculture and dealing with waste. The difference between current conformity and future rebellion is who is responsible to look after these issues. And in rebellion, we want to really empower ourselves to solve these issues via our day-to-day choices. There's so many brands that are starting to help consumers navigate this space, but I thought VB was a great one. In 2020, VB achieved its commitment to being entirely powered by solar energy. In 2021, it extended that commitment by trading a case of VB for every $30 of solar energy from consumers, and that really increased both salience and the relevance for the brand overall. Just one example. Expenditure, so consumer spend, another really interesting one where changes are happening. I think regardless of social values, the thing keeping Australians up at night is the cost of living, followed by housing affordability. And less than half of Australians would describe their financial situation as comfortable. And most of us are actively trying to manage our finances, but only about a third are confident that we're going to have enough to live on in retirement. So this stress really puts then a lot of stress on the choices that we make on a daily basis. And from a consumption perspective, we really are in search of value. So when you look in the data, what you see is from a conformity perspective, those that are seeking lower prices for the same products and brands, whereas in rebellion, you find a group that is significantly more likely to try new and different products that provide better value for money. So a very different space ahead. An example here in terms of innovation that met an increasing need amongst consumers. Although a substantial amount of cannibalisation is needed to be accounted for here, the product switch would have been a very positive one, with the innovation at about 23% premium in terms of price per gram. So many consumers are actually willing to pay more for an option that suits their personal needs. So just to sum up, things to be on the lookout for as increasing values really drive that consumer desire for breakthrough innovation that changes everything, sustainable practices that really lighten their impact on the environment, personalisation for their needs and preferences, and alternatives that provide for a better way, and finally those functional benefits for modern priority outcomes. So thank you, and I look forward to speaking with you soon in the upcoming panel discussion.
Thank you, Denise. Knowing the market is only part of the challenge. Having the right skills, connections with technical and business experts to unlock potential and build scale is really important. Kim Seagram is chair of Ferment Tas, one of the several regional clusters FIAL established. Kim is going to share the experiences of a region-led collaboration and the critical role it plays in driving value adding within the sector.
Thank you, Michelle, for the kind introduction. And yes, I'm Kim from Ferment Tasmania. Fermentation Tasmania Limited is a not-for-profit company developed on a cluster economic development model, and it's to grow the agri-food and beverage sector in Australia. It's driven by a board of industry experts and has been driven by industry from the beginning and will be until the end. Now, I'd probably like to start off with a quick definition around fermentation. Fermentation is that absolutely delicious alchemy that transforms primary produce into a value-added product. Think grapes into wine, cabbage into kimchi, barley into beer, and milk into cheese. Not only do this transformation create something that's more delicious, but it also creates something that's more nutritious. We are based in Launceston, Tasmania, but we are an economic development driver for the agri-food sector across the country. We looked at this as an opportunity, but we also looked at it as solving a bit of a problem. There's a huge opportunity to take advantage of the value add that we can create out of value adding to our primary produce. Rather than selling our milk off as a powdered commodity sensitive to global prices, let's turn that into some of the best cheese in the world, as just one simple example. Starting a food business is incredibly difficult. It is very costly to set up the facility and get the equipment in there. And if you can access the training, it's very hard to actually get some industry qualifications outside of the wine industry. These are all things we saw a need to address. But again, that cost of setting up the facility is the biggest hurdle to starting these new food and beverage businesses. Now, food and beverage entrepreneurs and their employees need specific skills to succeed, and they need their employees to have them as well. Currently, there are a number of jobs around the country just waiting for that perfect person who has those skills to be able to jump in. We also want to continue to build that entrepreneurial ecosystem and create those new businesses that create those new jobs into the future. I hear you ask, why fermentation? It changes the way we make and eat. We really have to look at how we are value adding and the incredible quality of what we can produce through fermentation. We also have to look at the health outcomes. We have to look at our microbiome. We have to look at the nutraceutical industry, and we have to look at how we keep ourselves healthy in body and mind. And we know that now a lot is through the gut and through that microbiome that's in your gut. We have to grow positive outcomes for our community. We have to create those jobs and businesses. And again, that entrepreneurial ecosystem will help do that. We have to create new career paths. Locally, we have a number of people really reaching out for people who have skills in the fermentation sector, and there's just not enough trained people out there because there's not enough formal training for them outside of the wine industry. We also have to look at how we redefine waste. And we have to capture the value of that waste and help create that circular economy journey. From bioenergy created by just fermenting waste products to be able to fuel the system, which we'll be able to do through an anaerobic biodigester, to using seconds to create fermented vegetable products. And while in Australia, we're only just really starting to tap the market in the pickles and the fermented vegetables, we live in Southeast Asia, and across this great region, people eat them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So huge opportunity. So rather than feeding those seconds and out of spec veggies to the cows and pigs back on the farm, let's make some more products out of them. Now, our global first solution is a fermentation hub. This fermentation hub is an incubator for all of the things that I've just been describing. It's an industry-led facility providing specialized skills and product development. It's building commercial links across industry, academia, government, consumers, and the community. And this is going to be that absolute innovation incubator that's going to solve problems and create opportunities for our fabulous produce into the future. This hub will provide that perfect platform, again, lowering the bar to get people in to create a new product. So once they've finally gone from a concept to a market testing to actually a full production level, they know they've got a business and they can set up back on farm, or they can set up adjacent to us, whichever they'd prefer, and be able to access the equipment and the kit that we will have at the facility. But through that new product development, we'll be able to start up new businesses, we'll be able to grow existing ones. We're going to strengthen the opportunity to have those specialized skills and the knowledge of the industry and be able to cross-train across different fermentation sectors. Winemakers are really busy for about 3 months of the year. What do they do the rest of the year? Why not brew beer, distill something, make some beautiful fermented pickles, learn how to make cheese. Again, there's so many skills that can go across the sector through fermentation. It's a really exciting opportunity. Now, we're going to have to focus on really commercially focused research. So this is the thing that actually creates those new products, that solves those wicked problems, that really helps the industry grow and create the force that we can be. We also want to be a focal point for agritourism and really create those experiential courses so that people will come just to be able to learn how to make fresh cheese, or maybe upskill themselves in their own personal profession. And we're calling that technical tourism. So they can actually come, travel here, be able to enjoy the insights that we'll be able to share with them and the new skills. Now, there's also some circular economy insights we're going to be able to address. By setting up this facility around a circular economy, we're going to be able to show other processors and producers how to do it in their own region around the country. And we'll have that global outreach through commercial linkages. And I don't know if you guys know, but Launceston has just been named a city of gastronomy with the UNESCO Creative Cities. So we're really going to have the spotlight put on us for the agri-food and the agribusiness opportunities in the region. So please feel free to take advantage of that. Again, talking about the incredible jobs, in Tasmania alone, there's 350 jobs going wanting right now. And we just need the people with the skills to be able to fill those. Now, through the Building Better Regions Fund, we've actually secured some of the federal funding that we need. We're needing to secure the last bit of state funding, and we're doing some work to be able to satisfy the state government on that side of things. We've got a lot of our private, and the West Hammer Council has been remarkable in supporting what we're doing right now. So, on that note, thank you very much. Fermentation transforms. It transforms produce, it transforms lives, and it can transform economies. Thank you very much for joining us today. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much, Kim. Our final speaker is Nick Hazell, CEO of V2 Food. Nick is going to show how the insights, collaborations, and networks can come together to forge not just a new business, but a new product category.
Hi, my name's Nick Hazell. I am the CEO and founder of V2 Food, and I'm going to give you a quick 10-minute blast on why I think plant-based protein is a massive opportunity for the Australian agri-food system. We're really exciting times. I think there's a lot of disruptions happening in food and agriculture. It's probably the most exciting time to be involved in this space. And I think the whole plant-based movement is extraordinarily exciting. And I think we should be framing it up as an enormous opportunity for Australia. I've put protein in inverted commas because I can't say plant-based meat, because there seems to be some sensitivities here. But just to make it abundantly clear, I am not a vegan myself, and I don't believe that plant-based protein is an existential threat, particularly to the Australian meat industry. I think Australian meat industry, particularly as it becomes more sustainable, has a very long and profitable future. So why does V2 exist? It's because there is no way on earth for us to feed a growing global population that loves the taste of meat by 2050. The demographics, 10 billion people, meat consumption at sort of 50 kilos per person per year, grows with GDP. GDP is growing. Developing markets are eating more and more meat, and we run out of land within my lifetime, and frighteningly quickly, because meat is grown by growing feedstock effectively, and we run out of land to grow the feedstock. It's as simple as that. There is no land left, and we're already destroying biodiversity, destroying the Amazon, destroying forests in order to grow more feedstock to feed the animals that we love to eat. And the projections are that the alternative protein market size will be in the trillions by 2040. And the only thing about all of these predictions, which are obviously all wrong, is that the further along, the most recent predictions are the ones which are the biggest. So as more and more evidence comes in, these predictions are getting higher and higher. The size of the meat industry, or the animal protein industry, I think is about 1.5 trillion. So you can see that this is sort of a doubling, if you like, but coming from alternative protein. V2 is 3 years old. We started with a collaboration with CSIRO. We have an absolute conviction that great tasting food, great food, can also be sustainable and be consistent with the boundaries that we have on our planet. It was founded by me after a conversation with CSIRO, Phil Moyle and Jack Cowan. So Martin Cole was at CSIRO at the time, and they asked me if I was interested in forming a company around plant-based meat, utilizing some science and also some scientists that were available in CSIRO, and working together with Jack, particularly for the first product, which if we had good consumer results versus Impossible, Beyond and Meat, Jack offered to launch in his Hungry Jack's restaurants, which we did in October of 19, so about sort of 9 months into our existence. We expanded internationally through Burger King, and we're going to expand through all of the restaurants in Australia when COVID hit, and we pivoted to retail. And then, so what we did is we developed our retail propositions, got back into Asia at the end of 2020, built our manufacturing facilities in Wodonga and also in Queensland, and then immediately started focusing on China and Asia. Put simply, our strategy is to be number one in Australia. In order for us to export to the rest of the world, Australia is going to be a tiny part of our market, and we want to export meat to the rest of the world. That's what we want to do, and we want to do that at scale, because this is a global problem. It's not enough just to be a good niche player in Australia. This needs to be a global endeavor. And we're now number one in Australia. So we've achieved our first aim. I think about more than a quarter of the volume of plant-based meat in Australia is made by V2, which is pretty good growth, given that we've only been in retail for just over a year. And we're growing all the time. And I think that this is as I say, there is a trend to plant-based, but there's also a very big trend towards sustainability, which we are on. In terms of my background, I've been R&D director for major food multinationals, so and working in the consumer space. So I sort of cross between sort of big food multinationals and the sort of the academic and the science world. My background's an engineer, aerospace engineer. My first career was in aerospace. In terms of how we do it, we work with a lot of partners, including the meat industry, a very important partner of ours. And we do science extremely quickly with both CSIRO and university partners. We are on a mission, and solving this problem slowly is not solving this problem at all. If we haven't made significant progress in the next sort of 10 years, and by progress we mean that 10% of the problem has been solved globally, then we're just scratching at the problem. It is of no significance, and we don't believe that that's the right sort of ambition. Examples, obviously CSIRO and UTS, but we're also working with GrainCorp. We're working with Loam, which is a wonderful company that has been developing the science of carbon sequestration in soils for more than a decade now, and we're working with them on a number of crops that are going into our product with some quite spectacular results in terms of carbon sequestration into the soil. And we're working with South Australia, developing a flavor science capability in South Australia, AGIC on fractionation of flours, etc. UTS on algae systems. So there's a lot of collaboration in Australia and abroad. Also work with the meat industry. We set up the Alternative Proteins Council. We're trying to create a movement here in Australia. And then abroad, we have big partnerships in China. It's an important market, 1 billion people, biggest meat consumption in the world. And we work with meat industry partners who manufacture our meat. And we do see ourselves very much as part of the meat industry. And also we partner with retail in as much as it is possible to partner with retail in Australia. Why is it a massive opportunity for Australian agri-food? Well, we can't ignore that animal-based meat consumption is a third of the global sustainability problem. You could argue whether it's a bit more or a bit less, but essentially the way we feed the world with our insatiable desire to eat meat is the problem. And it is a problem that has to be solved because population's growing and we're eating more and more meat and we just run out of land. In Australia, we have the wonderful opportunity. We could solve both parts of this by making the meat bit sustainable and figuring out how to make delicious plant-based meat that's both completely delicious, so there's no problem switching, and affordable, and exporting it to the world. And that's what B2 is trying to do. Other point, we need to create double the amount of global meat. So again, it's an and. If we got rid of the meat industry, we would double the problem, because we've got to create another meat industry. So there's a big enough problem to be solved. The fundamentals of making meat from plants is compelling. A kilo of legumes will make 2 kilos of meat broadly. If you fed it through an animal, you're going to need 10 kilos of legumes fed to a cow to make a kilo of meat. If you do the maths on what's the legume capacity for Australia, you could imagine a scenario where Australia could export 5 times more meat to a global market that's thirsting for more meat, if we did it from plants as well as from animals. And you could argue about whether it's 5x or 10x or whatever, but it's much, much bigger than the current meat industry. The other bit is, I think Australia could become the leader in sustainability. We already do. There's agricultural practice in Australia that already sort of leading the world in this space. But in general, Australia is not doing a good job on sustainability. We're not well regarded globally. And that's a shame, because we could be. And I think agriculture can lead the way. I think the carbon sequestration in soils is an enormous opportunity. Back of the envelope calculations give you enormous benefits there, to the order of magnitude of even a third of Australia's carbon footprint. I think there's opportunities to decommoditize cropping. So we actually create the varieties that we want, and then we actually add the value in Australia. So we're working in a joint venture on protein extraction. So it becomes the protein of choice for plant-based meat, not just in Australia, but globally. And we think that's a great opportunity for Australian farmers, and that's something that we're pushing really hard. I think there's an opportunity to figure out how to grow animal meat sustainably, and I applaud MLA and work with Asparagopsis and other things we can do to have true sort of carbon zero meat, because that's going to be part of the solution as well. And I think that the biotech industry, fed from great sustainable Australian sugar, for example, but also in the spaces we're active in in biotech and working with other partners in biotech and pursuing algae as a opportunity for some of the ingredients we need. We see an enormous opportunity there for Australia to participate. And you put it all together, and I think that you see that there is a huge value-adding opportunity for Australian agriculture, and especially when we grow the crops, we grow the ingredients, and then we add value in Australia to solve a global problem, a global sustainability problem, a global food supply problem, which is here and now and has to be solved. So I think I've given a little bit of provocation, and I'm really looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I'm just looking for, so we're opening up now to questions from the panel, and I am trying to see if I can get those up, Nick. Bear with me. iPad's not working. Here we go. So while people are thinking about their questions, Nick, one for you. V2 Foods has moved really fast in 3 years. What are the lessons for others in growing Australian manufacturing?
Yeah, we have gone insanely fast. My background's in multinationals. There is no way on earth that we could have ever done what we've done in V2 if I was still R&D director of big multinationals. And there's a couple of reasons why startups can go so fast. One is we've got a collaborative mindset right from the very start. We weren't going to try and do this on our own. We were going to partner with existing infrastructure, partner with the meat industry, and design our product so that it was scalable right from the start. We could have done this in a very different way, but we decided, as I say, solving this problem slowly is not solving this problem. So how could we get to scale really, really quickly? The other way is how we engage with academics and universities. We were reaching in to our academic and university partners, demanding results in real time, getting onto the bench with them and following the results. It wasn't like, here's some money and give us a report in a year's time. It was hands-on. Some academics were uncomfortable initially. They actually found it pretty tough, the intensity with which we were demanding results. But the feedback we're getting is actually academics want impact. They want to see that their science is actually doing something. So it's been a rewarding endeavor for both the academic partners we're working with and for the business. And the other reason we're going so fast is simply we haven't got a bloody choice. We really have to move fast. So we're taking risks now, which would be borderline irresponsible if you were a corporate, but actually we have no choice if we're going to solve this in Australia. So for me, it's been from going from corporate to startup has been a really rewarding journey. And I encourage all the other startups that are trying to do the same sort of thing.
Thanks, Nick. Question for you, Denise. What's the implication of a rebellion consumer mindset for a grower or supply chain?
Great question. Always want to know how it's applicable and what we should be looking out for. Week to week, we screen and test thousands of ideas with consumers, and more we're seeing those that have that rebellion mindset starting to creep in, whether it's around functional foods or whether it's around products that help create less waste, etc. And once we're testing those ideas with consumers and they're getting strong results and strong appeal, they are typically converted into propositions or concepts for testing and then through to prototypes. So, a great idea from a consumer and, value-led consumer pull soon comes to the R&D team. How can we create a prototype? How might this work? Rapid, agile prototyping takes place, and that's a great success as well. And then the conversation starts flowing down towards, cost of goods and supply chains and to growers. So this is basically the flow of the consumer values, the consumer ideas flowing through the organisation down to, all the way through that supply chain. So I think that the value in terms of understanding the consumer values and trends, is really about seeing what is coming up and how we can all participate in creating the products and services that truly do meet those needs.
Thank you. Question for you, Kim. Can you tell us how Ferment has started? Where did the idea come from? Who chose fermentation?
You're on mute.
If you're speaking, we can't hear you, Kim.
Sorry. It was a really interesting initial idea that was a collaboration through the Centre for Food Innovation, which was a collaboration between the University of Tasmania, the CSIRO, and the Defence Forces, because we've got the DSTO facility up in Scottsdale here. And they actually sent some consultants around and consulted with industry. Again, as Denise is saying, let's go talk to the people who can make some decisions and who are also going to be informed by the consumers and really understand what's needed. And rather than just one big shiny Centre for Food Innovation, they actually realized that we needed a whole network of things across the north of Tasmania, because at that point in time, we were very good at growing some of the best produce in the country, just not very good at value adding to it. So even a shed where you could wash carrots, put it in a bag that had a bit of a brand on it, was going to be a step ahead. They did recommend a Centre for Fermentation for Launceston, and also a centre that was going to provide some packaging and bottling and other capabilities like that. So that was where the germ of the idea came from. And we sort of stumbled along with a little community group. We talked to industry from the get-go, understood from all levels in industry that what they wanted. But it wasn't until you guys at FIAL and Mariana discovered us that we actually realized we were on a bit of a journey around the cluster economic development model. So being put through those 2 days of cluster theory, we realized we were about 80% through the journey, and very quickly realized that natural tendency for collaboration was the thing that was going to be that real innovation driver. It was going to allow people to share their expertise and to really allow others to grow alongside of them rather than just holding their cards close to their chest. And it also addresses that scale, because one of those things is not only starting these businesses, but scaling them up. We all know that yawning valley of death. And Nick, I'm sure you've faced that a few times yourself. But, you know, getting some hand-holding so you can actually get over that to be able to scale up a business is absolutely essential if you're going to have success into the future. So why fermentation? Fermentation is that smart specialization. We didn't just want to be a general center. We wanted to focus on something that was going to have an impact that had synergies throughout that specialization. So when you're looking at all the fabulous fermented food and beverages, the applied science of chemistry and microbiology is really quite applicable across all the different fermented food and beverages, and it just really made sense.
So 2 things for the audience. What is a cluster and why is it important for the food industry? Kim.
A cluster is absolutely essential. I've actually seen it personally. I helped the little farmers market locally get up and running, Harvest Launceston. And it's a wonderful little community farmers market that we started 10 years ago. And to see a number of people selling their products side by side every Saturday morning, and that's all they were doing. Okay, there wasn't any formal anything other than you come to the market to be able to sell your goods to the local community. Then also, all of a sudden, they realized it was a bit of a market test bed, and then the relationships were formed and the trust was formed between the different producers. And I just know that the growth of these businesses have gone from strength to strength on the fact that they've been sharing with their market stallholder collaborators. They've been sharing everything from cool store to marketing opportunities to creating new products together. You know, all of a sudden, one of our cheese producers and our basil producer and our olive oil producer are producing pesto together. Our honey producer and our one of our olive oil producer are trying to making lip balm. You know, it's just all of those things. And unless you have those people working together and helping solve each other's problems, you don't get those sparks of innovation that you would just in isolation. Thanks,
Kim. So there's a question here that's getting a lot of votes, which I'll put to Nick, Kim and Denise. The question is, establishing a value-adding sector in Australia makes a lot of sense, given our strong production record. How do you successfully remain competitive with higher costs associated with startup, labour and other overheads? So I'll start with you, Nick, then come to you, Kim, and then Denise.
I'm not sure whether Australia has a great reputation for production, certainly not in terms of adding value to agricultural commodities. We're quite the reverse. We seem to be trading commodities. I think we're coming from a low base, but that doesn't mean that we can't do that. I don't think that labour is a significant point. You know, a lot of this is science and investment in technology. So I don't see any reason why there are any limits to what we do, but what we do need is investment, because some of these processing is capital intensive, but we do have enormous depth of scientific and engineering know-how in Australia. The difference is that it's not really being utilised for value adding in Australia, and that's what we've got to change, because the value adding potential for Australia to take the wonderful produce that we grow and turn it into, what is it for plant-based meat versus grain? Are we talking 20x the sort of value that we can create if we turn that into plant-based meat. That's the sort of opportunity that requires investment, and it requires taking the talent that we've got in Australia and directing onto these opportunities.
Thanks, Nick. Kim.
And this is what I addressed before. And I'm really glad you asked, because it's those costs that are so prohibitive. If you can get some major multinationals and investors behind it, that's fine. But if you're just a tiny little mom and pop SME in the background, how do you start up? How do you get going? And we actually feel by providing the fermentation hub, which will be an incubator facility, which will have winery, cider, brewery, dairy, commercial fermentation kitchens and a sourdough bakery in there, you can actually come in and lower the bar to be able to start, at least be able to get a product up, have your hand held, and know you've got something that can start a real business going forward. I'm actually really hoping that this is going to be a bit of a model. And again, in the spirit of collaboration between clusters, we've actually shared our business plan with the Food and Agriculture Network up in the Central Coast, and they're developing a beverage creation facility around our business model that we shared with them. So I think the more we can collaborate together, and through the cluster work, which is just so bloody essential, the faster we'll be able to achieve all of these things. Because as Nick's pointed out, we're not very good at value adding right now. We've got to get much better at it.
Thanks, Kim. Denise, do you have a view on this?
Oh, the things that I'm hearing, I guess, that are consumer relevant here is, making great product and doing more here, within our shores. It does cost money, and how does that flow through to consumers that are a little stressed around finances? They're watching every dollar they spend. And again, it's about creating value, and creating value in the consumer's eyes. If you're building that story around provenance, you're a brand that stands for something, you're ticking the boxes in terms of health, sustainability, indulgence, even if it's simply delicious and has a story behind it, then, consumers are willing to pay. It's that kind of lipstick luxury, I guess, that we used to talk about. Consumers will pay for something that they value. It's just about understanding the factors that are coming together to create that value.
Thank you. So while you've got the microphone, FIAL's capturing the prize of doubling the size of food and ag by 2030 and the 19 growth opportunities. It seems that your insights align with two of the roadmaps that have been developed: targeted eating, health and wellness. What's your view on those two roadmaps and how people online might actually get involved?
It's really exciting, actually, Michele. When I was reading through a couple of things that was shared with me, and that was around those 10 trends and then these 19 opportunities, the first thing that hit me was, and I read everything with the Millennium Monitor lens, that they were in the parts of the Millennium Monitor that were either conformity, so where we are now, or rebellion, where we're going. So that was comforting just as a first look. And then kind of looking further into those, provenance I just mentioned in the last response there, that was intensified by the pandemic. So that is one that is certainly kind of at hand at the moment in terms of an opportunity. But also, as you mentioned, in terms of that health and wellness playing out, both as a trend and an opportunity, really is in that space that we're going to, where consumers want to take control. They want to be personally empowered for their goals in terms of health, whether that be holistic, whether it be the precision health goals that we might have around our microbiome, detoxification, digestive health, the connection to mental health. There is so much there to dig into and so much in front of us to work towards. And I was really happy to see that alignment between those opportunities and what our Trends Monitor is saying. So thanks for asking that, Michele.
Thank you. So Nick, I've got a question here, interesting, a lot of votes for it, somewhat contentious, so we'll give it a go. Regarding plant-based meat, are there issues with excess water usage in manufacturing these products? And are there other issues with sodium and additive levels in these products? If you're on, we can't hear you, Nick.
Yeah, no, okay. So the question, water usage, right?
Yeah, so
No, it
water.
depends. I think there's a way of doing some proteins which are, I mean, we can get technical here, which involve solubilization of protein through a water system, very thirsty. But there's also ways of doing this with very, very little water. And then the important thing there is to understand that the amount of legume, if you like, converted directly into meat versus going through an animal, it's like 20 times more efficient. So if there's any water used in agriculture, in growing crops or legumes, well, if you to feed to animals, then you're going to be 20 times more efficient. And the academic work which has studied this supports it. And of course, what we do is we ask the scientists to do a full life cycle assessment of our energy and water usage. And those are the numbers that guide us. And I think we're sort of, many orders of magnitude better than animal meat. So, but I don't take my word for it. Follow the scientists, and they will guide you. In terms of salt, there's a lot of furphies around plant-based meat. We asked the CSIRO and their nutrition department, which are world-renowned, to say what should our product be in terms of the nutrition, and that's guided how we formulated. We are a formulated product. We're not dictated by the biology of an animal. We can actually improve the nutrition of our product, in terms of fiber and nutrients. Salt, we're in the 50 milligrams, I think, per 100 grams it's not even a couple of grains of salt. And admittedly, it is actually less than meat, but it's nowhere near the levels that you would have in a tomato sauce or in a pinch of salt or anything that you might add to your meat to make it taste good. Because believe me, if you just sort of boil some mince and eat it, it doesn't have a lot of flavor. So it's a furphy. It's not relevant in the big scheme of things. It's a fraction of percentage daily intake. But it's one of those memes that are out there. And I kind of understand there are some elements of the meat industry that feel a bit threatened. As I've said, and I hope that has been heard, there is no threat to the Australian meat industry. The world is thirsty for sustainable Australian meat. And the value that we can create there is enormous. But we need to create far more meat than we can ever do from animals. So let's embrace this huge opportunity, and rather than see if we can pick holes at the plant-based opportunity.
Thanks, Nick. So, Kim, question: how do people find out about clusters, and what are the basics of building a cluster?
I think going to Food Innovation Australia Limited and talking to Marianne and the team is the best way to start talking about clusters. But E4 Fox Williams, who's based in New Zealand, is also a great resource as well. And there's the Oceanic chapters just starting up as well. And my colleague and co-founder of Fermentaz is actually helping facilitate that, Tom Lewis at RDS Partners. So there's three good ways, and you're more than welcome to give me a ring. I'm happy to wax lyrical about the opportunities that clusters can present. And sorry, Michele, the other part of your question?
I think you've answered it all. Thank you, Kim.
Not a problem.
So the question for three of you, the questions come through specifically for V2, but I think it's worth throwing to all three. Is the privately owned or government partnership enough to scale globally? And in particular, Nick, do you have to go public listed to scale up? So I'll ask you first, Denise.
Ooh.
So the question is privately owned or government partnership enough to scale globally in your view?
Well, I always come back to what consumers, find appealing and what's really serving their values and meeting their needs. That can be privately owned or government. It could be privately owned and government. I think what we are, we're seeing more and more kind of unusual collaborations that we haven't seen in the past, because people are coming together and business is coming together to, do good things and do better things. So I'd say any collaboration or anyone that can go out and make a difference and move us into that space that makes us feel that we are, doing better or having a better product or a better service is the way to go from a consumer perspective.
Thank you. So Kim, from your perspective, you've got a lot of SMEs. Is the private owned and or government through some government funding enough to scale globally?
I think so. And I think this actually harkens back to what Denise was talking about. If you've listened to the consumer and you know what the market wants, and you create a product that that delivers the value and the quality of what the consumer wants. I'm very consumer centric, having done a lot of marketing and PR in the past myself. I think you can achieve a lot. I think if you look to the North American model, and particularly in the US, it's all private sector, and the growth there is massive. And much like Nick's done, he's innovative very quickly. So the old, if you're going to fail, go big, go fast, and fail fast. So I think if you're going to try to scale it significantly, you really do have to give it a go. But again, it's that point of time. It's what the consumer wants, and go forward. As for government partnerships, I think there's that area within that startup and that SME wanting to scale up, where that intervention and that assistance can happen, much like the fermentation hub will for our SMEs. But yeah, no, it's the success of the product and the business behind it and how they market it and push it. It's not necessarily whether it's privately or government owned.
Thanks. So Nick, the question was specifically for you. Same question, privately owned and government partnership, but you've obviously got some people online who'd like to be an investor. So the question is V2 going listed company so that retail and institutional investors can fund the scaling and follow their values with their investments in company and get a dividend?
Yeah, look, traditional is you do a startup and then at a certain moment you do an IPO, but there is an awful lot of money that is chasing sustainability. There is no way you can raise large amounts of money now in this space if you do not have an attitude about sustainability. And it's pretty clear that there is no real industry that, if it isn't focused on sustainability, really has a long-term future. So there is a lot of money chasing companies that have a real chance of doing something big and successful at a sustainability level. So I don't know. I watch the US and I look at Beyond, and their share price dropped. Sometimes analysts are not people who do take a long-term view about whether a company is doing the right thing long-term, and they'll worry about the quarterly profits. So it's one of those things that it's you would think very carefully about going public. But raising with institutions that are committed to sustainability, there's pension funds, there's other tiers of investment other than venture capital. I think there should be an opportunity, and wouldn't it be great if people who have their pensions and have their savings could invest in something which is actually going to be good for their children, and they know that their money and savings is going into something that's going to preserve the planet and not destroy it. So, and that trend it's abundantly clear to everybody who's following the markets.
Thanks, Nick. So last question, Kim, and a quick one because we've got 1 minute left. The idea of using waste to create biofuel through fermentation, who's doing it?
Well, we've actually got our TasGas down here who are working with an anaerobic biodigester, who we've been working with and have a little bit of an NDA signed with them around. They're actually just commissioning it with some of our local industry players that are already here. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to co-locate that at the fermentation hub facility when it's built next year, and be able to show everybody else how they can do it too.
Thanks, Kim. In closing, I'd like to thank each of our panellists for generously sharing their insights and expertise with our audience. I'd like to encourage those watching to action one of the many valuable insights that have been shared today. Tripling the value of the sector may sound daunting, but it's not. We know what needs to be done. There are many in the sector, like our panellists, who can show how to do it. It just requires everyone to step out of their comfort zone and take action. Thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you well.